Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are going to give people time to trickle in. I know it's hard with everything going on in the middle of the day to find the time, but it's definitely worth it, as all of you who follow our series know. And I am personally very, very excited to welcome two of my colleagues here at NYU. I'm Anna Tavis, a department chair and clinical professor of human capital management at the School of Professional Studies. And my guests today, and let me just see, yes, we have a quorum now, quite a few people already in the room, but I am thrilled to welcome Noel Anderson, who is the professor of educational leadership and policy studies at NYU Steinhardt, an innovator in the space of work of the future workplace and the future of work, and also Lisette Nieves, who is partnering with Noel on a whole series of books that we're going to discuss today. But in addition to being a distinguished professor at Steinhardt, Lisette is also the president for the Fund for the City of New York, and doing work not only academically, but also in the city, helping us achieve the goals we have set for ourselves for the talent that we are trying to develop here in the city internally. And so Lisette and Noel are a phenomenal, colleagues, and a huge asset to both NYU and the city of New York. And it is with this in mind that we are going to have our webinar today. We already have over 70 people in the room, and I know that people are going to be coming in and out. So what we decided to do is to run it as a fireside chat, because clearly we can all see PowerPoint slides. We've all been there, done that. But I think what's really valuable is to get Noel's and Lizette's immediate reaction and kind of go back and forth with the questions answer format. So for the Q&A, I want to encourage you, just the logistics here, to put your questions and answers in the Q&A section of the webinar. But in the chat, just to welcome everyone, I would like you to let us know where you're calling from, so that we have a sense of connecting to the audience, that both our speakers and myself really, really want to make it feel like that we are all in one room together talking about these very important topics. And also, of course, as we go through our conversation, your immediate reaction, responses, and questions is going to be what's feeding this particular dialogue going forward. And I see quite a bit of interesting locations here all over the United States map: Texas, Chicago, Scottsdale, Arizona, Georgia, New Jersey, and many other places. So all of you are welcome for this 1 hour to New York University. And we're here in what we call here in the city. So let me just get started with kind of bridging that gap and making the connection to our speakers really personal. Lisette and Noel, tell us a little bit about how you got to do the work that you're doing now. We'll start with Lisette.
Hi, Anna. What a pleasure to be here and be in conversation with you. What brought me to doing the work that I do is a combination of dealing with young people and workforce through a variety of lenses. One as a funder through government, one as a policymaker through government, one as a builder, as a nonprofit and founder of Europe of a workforce program The other is as of a researcher. So these multiple lenses have kind of kept me in this space. And then I have a wonderful collaborative partner and colleague with Noel. And so that has then allowed us to just continue to build upon it.
Fantastic. Noel, what about you?
Great. No, this is fantastic. And Anna, thank you for inviting us again. Appreciate you and your work. Um, and it's always good to be in partnership with Lisette. Even, just we talk all the time, but this is always great to kind of share our work. So I actually came to the work as a middle school teacher many, many moons ago. I started teaching in New York and in Philadelphia, and then kind of made my way through graduate school, and was always concerned about young people. And my work really converged when I did my initial research for my dissertation at NYU. I actually graduated from NYU back in 2004, got my doctorate from the same department. And one of the things that emerged in my research was the nexus between college access and work. So when I was doing my research, I was coming across primarily young men in my study, and I was looking at the kind of Great Society program, kind of college access programs from 1960s, and realizing that the young people were talking about navigating work as they were looking at college. And so that led on this kind of journey. Most of my early work was on segregation in high schools and middle schools, and looked at mayoral control, and then realized that the workforce piece coming up. And so I spent some time working in workforce and worked closely with Lisette at Year Up, and then came back to the academy, and we realized that much of our work is now converging, not only in the research space, but in the practice space. And so that's how we arrived to where we are.
Fantastic. And if I remember correctly, your first book was on something in Brooklyn, right? So something really, really local at the same time resonated with the issues that are relevant probably around the world.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I looked at gentrification in Brooklyn. I looked at issues of kind of segregated schools, but then gentrification impacting historically segregated schools, and looked at work around segregation and young people's voices, speaking about segregation across the country. So in California, New York, and Texas, and a few other places. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was always this sort of, I think both of us in our practice and our research was always concerned with, youth voices, and also looking at the context and history that kind of gave rise to the challenges we're seeing right now, not only in education, but in the workforce space.
Yeah, really incredible. One question I have to kind of follow up again on the impact that you're making across so many different constituents is as I follow your careers, you show up in different parts of the world. So even though we're talking about the fund for the city of New York, but you were you were major contributors to the conference we had in Berlin. And the next thing I know, you're in Abu Dhabi. And the next time I run into you, you were in Washington, D.C. So how do you see, that your work and your focus primarily on New York City resonating kind of globally? Do you see the same types of issues that you can identify across the world?
Yeah,
Oh,
hope that was it.
absolutely. I think there's no question that the that our we are much more global than we've ever been before, especially just through information and information exchange, migration patterns. And so for us, when we think about young people, and particularly when we think about the contribution we want to have to both research and practice, it is one that is borderless. It is one that really sees the connections that happen here in the US and beyond that. So for example, we all know about Brexit, but the truth is there are people who are actually really curious and interested. What happened to young people pre and post Brexit as far as employment? What did we see? Right? When we're talking about migration right now in New York and we're looking at all of these, what are we talking about? What did we see in Germany? What were the
Mhm.
migration patterns across Europe? How were young migrants integrated or not integrated? Why does that matter? We are part of a larger conversation, a global conversation. And the irony is that young people see themselves much more globally connected than maybe our generations in some ways. And so we're catching up to them. I'd say the other thing that I think is important is that where there's incredible innovation, because Noel and I had the joy of being able to build a doctoral program in leadership and innovation, and it's exciting to see some of our graduates are here. One of the things we realized, and we knew this too, is that what is happening in other parts of the world, thinking through work-based learning and education and technology and the future of work is pretty incredible. You have to look at places outside of New York City. You have to look throughout Asia, particularly at Singapore and other places like that. You have to look at Abu Dhabi. You have to. So for us, um, it's been really important to kind of remind folks, A, we don't live in a vacuum as Americans. B, the fastest growing youth populations are not here in the United States, but that are across the globe in other concentrations, and we need to know what's happening, and that's a pulse for us. And C is that there is a lane for research that speaks to both the practitioner, the researcher, and the policymaker. And we felt that while we're crossing borders, let's cross also these, as we say, silos, and build research that allows all three to communicate with each other.
Oh, I love that. I love the three parts, sort of practitioner, so very, very connected to what's going on. Researcher being able to reflect and understand the actual, not just react to what's happening, but really reflect and formulate what the trends, and then be it in the advisory role, hopefully, to have informed and evidence-based policies. I think that's what, Lisette, you are known for. And Noel, you have done, actually, just to illustrate this idea, you actually have done some work in Germany, as I understand it, looking at the German model. If you could just share a little bit of what you've done, and then how it translates to your advocacy for potential policies and practices here in the US.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, we some years ago, I mean, I would say, wow, going back to 2017 or so, we both Lisette and I decided to, much of our work, I should say, was engaged in building programs, workforce programs across the country. I mean, our work was very much involved with how do you scale and provide paid internships, right? This is in your sweet spot, Anna, in your work in the private sector. How do you think about pipelining talent? And so we saw a great appetite and activity around building programs in the space, particularly youth apprenticeships. And we saw increasingly kind of active movement towards doing it in fields that weren't necessarily, apprenticeships before, right? Blue collar moving more to white collar, right? So back office finance, you name it, right? Bigger kind of initiatives happening. And so for us, we were like, well, this is interesting. The US is having kind of an activation stage of around this work, but where are they getting their influences from? And many of them mentioned Switzerland, mentioned Germany. They talked about those models a lot. And so we said, well, this is interesting. What if we actually go there and learn about those models? And so, of course, the first step for us was going to Germany, spending a lot of time with leaders and in programs that have been around since the 1970s. I mean, and they were, obviously very well steeped into manufacturing and has now expanded into other areas of other industries. But we spent some time there and really looked at it from the lens of understanding what is it that we're trying to export into the US. And we found out a lot, which we share in the first book, Working to Learn. We did a deep dive case study in Germany, and looked at it from the lens of the history of it and understanding how states support, apprenticeships, which is very different than we have here in the US, right? So the notion around tax incentives and companies being incentivized in ways that are very different. Manufacturing base in Germany was like 25%. I think in the US was like less than 11%. So you're seeing a real, kind of a real change or shift, right, from that model into the US. But those conversations weren't happening in the robust ways that we thought. So we had to go investigate. And the second level of it, we got there and spent time and realized that, as Lisette highlighted, there were a number of folks who were concerned about immigration and migration and the integration of the talent into those roles. And we started to see some evidence of deep stratification, right, in the marketplace when it came down to time in the country or place of origin, or background, race, gender, and you name it. And so for us, it was, how do we put a lens and a light on these issues as we import, right, these issues into, or these topics, or these models into the US? We need to have a critical eye. So we felt it was time for us to do some deep dive research on it and really look at not only the model, but also what are the challenges, potential challenges even, that would happen in the US context. So we did that in Germany, we did that in Sweden. We looked deeply, we went into hospitality in Sweden and spent some time in the same models and learned a lot there. And then we also did a deep dive on Switzerland. And so that first book was really a way to bring together what we call the sort of designer genes approach to, model making, that we like to, import designer, ideas, but we don't necessarily want to bring in the challenges around, what does it mean to have an equitable approach to distributing opportunity that way. So that was the kind of the initial impetus for it.
And that's excellent. It sounds, and, obviously I read both of your books, that your focus has always been on work-based learning as the catalyst for new opportunities, for mobility, upward mobility. And basically with an argument that work-based learning experiences can be transformative for young people, and oftentimes kind of the only available pathway to really continue to advance and grow. So you work and you learn, and you just illustrated it in the apprenticeship approach. What other examples of this workplace learning do you see across different US maybe based models? What are the opportunities here? Do you think it's going to continue? Because you've invested so much of your research and time on kind of emphasizing the importance of this pathway. Is that?
Yeah.
It's thank you for that question. I would say a couple of things, Anna, and one is that I wholeheartedly believe that young people have more information than they've ever had, but less work-based opportunities than they've had, less ways to apply it. And this is an interesting, and that it also looks different. So a couple of things. One thing is, and I probably should have said this earlier, what got me into this is really understanding that this whole movement around what is the return on investment for higher ed comes out of this.
Yeah.
It comes out of, I am investing time and money. How is it connected to my economic mobility? And is it worth my time? And questioning this as a very young consumer in a way we've not seen before. And I think that's really important because that's young people also saying, what am I getting out of this experience? And what Noel and I realize is that they're asking that question much earlier too. They're asking that question even in high school. And when we look at particular persistence rates in high school and in higher ed, we know particularly what we've seen with young men is that when it is linked or tighter linked, and that's more my preferred research, tighter linked with work-based, where we have high academic and high work, there's a greater level of persistence and investment. And we know engagement is a key. Engagement is a key. And so when we're talking about this, it's kind of opening up the literature and saying, we went through 20 years of focused on college for all and skills building and drill and kill, as I call it, and testing and all of those things. But what we didn't do and what we left aside was project-based and work-based learning. And so exactly at a time that it is probably one of the most instrumental and informative ways of a young person building a sense of agency, which is critical, thinking about their futures, um, and also allowing them another safe context to show up in, to explore who they are and who they want to be. And so we deny that when we flatten the opportunities. And so we want to see them merge together. And sometimes the running joke has been, oh, Lizette, you and Noel are the work people, not the school people. And we joke about it. We're like, really? As if one has to trump the other. It's actually not. We actually see the challenge is the integration. The challenge is making that work in a way that is supportive and really pushes that young person. And we get to highlight incredible models across the globe that are doing that. And I'll end on this. The other part that's so fascinating, even when we were looking at the German model, the fastest growing internships and apprenticeships were what? Were the ones that applied school and work, not the ones that were the standalone. That's the model we hear all the time. Oh my goodness, it's great. We could just have another plumber. Nothing's wrong with being a plumber or anything like that, but we think about it and trades and how we talk about apprenticeships. The truth is, it's the ones that we're linking it with college, with counseling degrees, with teaching degrees, where they saw a great increase in apprenticeship engagement. So that says something about a signal to the academy. What do we want to see? But also a signal to, in Europe, these apprenticeship structures that were divorced from another credential. And so we loved exploring that because that was part of the how should we say, what was coming forward of the transitions that were happening in Europe. So
I mean, I think it's extremely insightful. I am familiar with both European models and obviously here, and you raised a couple of really, really critical issues right now that we are all looking at, and that's the value of education, right? So it's kind of the value of education as as an investment opportunity, as an asset, right? Noel, I'm sure you have some comments and to expand on what Lizette just presented to us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely the big question of the ROI on education, and sitting at a university, we're always thinking about this investment piece and how are we extracting the value from the programs and degrees that we're in. But as Lisette and I have been doing a deep dive on various models around the world and looking at it, particularly in the US, and we're now engaged in a larger national study looking at work-based learning across the country, which is the sort of second phase we'll get into more detail about. But what's coming up is, this notion around are some of the positions that we have that are available, do they require a college degree? And the question becomes, how do we, in fact, if a student wants to, a young person wants to get a credential, how do we marry the two in such a way that allows for talent to be supported to get both, right? And I think that's the questions that are really kind of on the landscape right now. And we know, and I say this carefully, and I'm not trying to disparage or say that college is not important, because particularly for the populations that we've studied, college is everything, right? Credentials are everything. When we hear the next tech leader who's dropped out of Harvard and created a multi-billion-dollar company, that never really applied to the populations that I'm most concerned about. We've always been lettered up, as they say, right? You have your master's degree and your tech, PhD and so on. It's a requirement to navigate a lot of these spaces. So we're saying it's a both and. But we do raise the question about how do we value, as Lisette mentioned, young people and families navigating education as consumers. And we really reduce, in some cases, debase their ability to kind of discern, right? And what we see in situations like that, and we've seen it in recent research, right? I'm thinking about Tracy Cottom's work called Lower Ed, which is a fantastic book, which talks about the number of single mothers, particularly Black women, who have, declared bankruptcy and not declared a major because they've gone into predatory for-profit institutions, right, seeking a credential. And so when we think about the subsidies that happen for, institutions that are leveraging government financial aid, but aren't providing the kind of credentials that we need. So those are the things that we want to work against and push against. And then how do we provide opportunities for real learning and attachment to not only where a young person may see themselves for the future, but also has a credential in the marketplace, supported by institution, supported by the corporate corridor or whatever industry they're going into, that is actually of value, right? That they return value. So I think those are the questions that are popping up now. And COVID, as an illustration, shook all that to the core. When you start to have folks who were no longer in classrooms and had to think about, how do I get my credential? How do I get my education? The explosion in online learning because it was a requirement, right? We couldn't leave the home. So all those things have changed not only the modality of how we learn, but ultimately how we see the value in it, in two-year colleges being kind of not just way stations, but actually a vehicle or an avenue for credentialing that can be recognized and supported. All those things have really disrupted our notions around pathway. And the last thing to highlight, and I think Lisette brought this up, is that the non-traditional student is the traditional student now. Right?
It's
Like,
so
right.
right.
And this at SPS, and you all, like, the non-traditional
There's no
student.
non-traditional
Traditional,
anymore.
not
Yes.
anymore, right? It's like, I got a job, I have a family, I've got, things to take care of. Like, it's so the 18-year-old who comes out of the house is a smaller percentage of the folks who are, right? If we think about the larger ecosystem of university and colleges, they've changed the game, right? We're not just talking about the selective competitive ones, right? So that's kind of where we are right now, is think about, like, let's connect the dots, let's bridge the silos, because the folks who are going into these institutions are already doing it for us, right? We just, policy and institutions haven't caught up.
Yeah.
Right? They're telling us, I need to have a flexible schedule so that I can actually work and get my credential and take care of all this other stuff, right? The unpaid work, right? On top of the market work. How do I bridge the two? They're already trying to do that, but for some reason, institutions have been rigid, not all, but some, right? With how to navigate that with the customer or the student. So that's where we are. How do we bridge?
What I love about your work is how granular and differentiated you are in looking at these different groups. It's almost like you have to custom build and offer the opportunities for this, diversity of learners out there, and not just your cognitive skills, that when we talk about different learning abilities and preferences, this is kind of the more academic differentiations, but really people coming from such a diversity of backgrounds and different needs. And just like a really uh, my personal sort of interest, we're also seeing people coming out of high schools and not necessarily going for apprenticeships, but having their own businesses on the side, or like entrepreneurship and kind of innovation. Is that a path that you're seeing as a kind of a growing opportunity for people to do this combined kind of, I'm studying, but I'm also running my own business?
Yeah, Lisa, you should talk about that, because this is something you've been bringing
Yeah,
up.
one of the areas I've been looking at is that particularly how are young people making their money, their first dollars. I remember, for some of us, it might have been babysitting, it might have been these things. We look at it. I just recently saw a report that up to 20% of young people make their first money over the internet, right? Make it through this kind of entrepreneurial energy. There is a trust, and I would say also a freedom and a flexibility more um, in cyberspace, and there may be an opportunities that may be in their communities. And that could be a negative thing too. But one thing we have to acknowledge is that young people are exerting a level of risk and energy and entrepreneurship in a way we hadn't seen before. And I think that is severely underexplored. This is why we call it the Future of Work, the Center for Youth and the Future of Work that Noel and I are working on, because we feel strong in partnership with the fund that we want to understand the decisions and the engagement of young people with AI and how it links to their future choices. we are seeing groups of young people who together are all buying AI memberships so that they can have their own AI. I mean, think about this, right? Like while universities are wringing their hands about what do I do with X? Oh my goodness, should I allow AI? They're so beyond that. And I'm
Mhm.
talking about high school age. I'm not even talking college age. And so, you know, what that says is that A, the tech-enabled generation is very different than us across class. This is not about a class distinction. I think that's a really important piece. What it says is that it needs more research. Um, it, there are some risks, and we're excited to double down and engage in that. I will say that I also see a real hunger and need, and Anna, this has been your work, paid internships and opportunities in the way we hadn't. So we're also at a time where it's my personal view, but we are extending adolescence to a point where we're almost saying that they could work later. And actually, I don't think that's always a good thing. I actually think working earlier is when I talked about agency, developmentally, what's happening with young people, it's an important part of how they understand themselves. And so by pushing that and delaying that, what we're doing is delaying all the sense making that a young person makes about themselves and their confidence and what they may do in the future to happen in college when that wasn't the case before. There was a little bit of that before. So these are like ripe areas we are looking at and exploring, and it overlaps with what you talk about too. So,
Yeah.
so happy to
Yeah.
offer that.
It's fascinating. I certainly think that the opportunity to get young people engaged at early on and already from childhood, I think we need to rethink the whole development, not just education, but a whole kind of development from the very beginning of how to give people this opportunity of agency when they have a lot more control. Because I think one of the things that COVID has done is kind of remove that sense of agency and control over their lives, and that created a very negative downstream effect. Let me ask you just one maybe niche question. What I've been picking up in some of the information is that because of AI, because of the agents that are coming in and kind of taking care of the clerical and entry level tasks that where the interns usually spent their time, that some of the educational institutions are reintroducing very kind of basic skills, like to your point, the plumbing, the sewing, etc. Those the skills that people can use in the economy that's as we are kind of in this transition period. So are you seeing any reintegration of those types of classes and trainings into the educational pipeline in any schools?
Well, I'll start, Lisa, and I think you can pick up on it. So here's we'll get to that, and I actually think here's where I want to be a little bit of a kind of a irritant, if I can use that term. I actually,
Provocateur. Yes, go for it.
yeah, it's probably better, right? Provocateur. Thank you for that language. So here's where I think where the higher ed needs to get in front of the game, right? So right now, and this is not my idea. This is Nancy Gleason, who's at colleague and good friend at
Yeah,
NYU Abu
yeah,
Dhabi,
yeah,
who was
yeah.
just there for a few months with spending time over there. And what's fascinating is she's been pushing on this in her work, particularly around AI. So go back to the AI thing, which is right now, higher ed, not all, but a number of higher ed institutions are incredibly over obsessed with academic integrity in AI. And the focus, and what I mean by that is, are you using AI to write your papers? Are you using AI to kind of do your research? Now, it's not saying that's something to disparage as small, right? It's an important issue. But I do think that when you're hyper focused on that, there's a kind of a policing that happens that doesn't allow for the unleashing of creativity and real rethinking of how education happens, right? And on top of that, how young people are consuming and using machine learning tools and AI tools for their own education and advancement. So what does that mean? It means that, in the UAE, for example, there's a focus on really promoting the use
Yes.
of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. And they're actually encouraging it. And what it does is it pushes us as educators to think about, how do we leverage it? How do we use it? How do we discern information better, right? Which is what we know is required. And this in your work in human resources and leading in these companies, is that you want learning agility to be at the core of the training and development of people, right? So how do you get them to be agile and think collaboratively and problem solve around information and information sharing? Because not everything you get is actually true. And how do you make that discernment? So I do think academic institutions can really push the envelope here and think about creative ways of engaging, right? Leveraging the tool. And the reason why it has a link to the career pathway work that you just brought up is that if it becomes kind of if it's centered as a tool and as actually an information sharing instrument, then it becomes something that becomes ubiquitous with how a person learns and develops. And when you go into the workspace, it becomes part of what you're using, right? And it's interesting, quick example of it. We had Atul Gawande, who's a well-known surgeon. He wrote a book called Better, and other texts that kind of follow. And he's pretty renowned for his work. And he shared about AI and work, particularly in his field in medicine. He said, AI will not replace doctors. And I'm paraphrasing him. He said, but doctors who use AI will replace the doctors of old, right? And it's true, right? How do you use it and leverage it? So I think that kind of direction, how do we leverage it to help and support learning? And then also, how does it translate into the workspace is important. So that's kind of one illustration of it. And I do think going into the space around, like, are we looking at traditional jobs or, trades as now becoming part of the ecosystem we kind of push them to the side? I still think there is a brow problem when it comes to training and development. I think the notion of any blue collar is still blue collar.
Yeah.
I believe that the white collar folks, and I'm probably included, I think all of us are,
Mm-hmm.
thought it would never touch us. We thought that, being a lawyer and being a paralegal is going to be safe zone, a bookkeeper is going to be safe zone, right? Now we're realizing, wait a minute, right? You can leverage this in those white collar positions, and now white collar jobs are being rethought and reimagined. So no one's safe, right? And so how do you think about leveraging the technology to allow for pathways to be created that look at skills and competencies that gives a person a pathway, right? And so one of the things we talked about in Berlin, and then I'll give it to Lisette, is that we talked about, like, look, and you know this from your work at AIG and other companies, is that, you all do workforce planning, serious workforce planning. You just kind of, you can look at, now it's big data sets. How do you think about big data? How do you think about people's, roles, and will those roles be phased out and so on? Now, not every company is using that muscle or using that data in the same way or have the capacity, but it is something to be said about thinking, how do you create these sort of job families and taxonomies that can inform how, college students, even high school students, even middle school students in Germany were getting access to kind of work career pathways, kind of information when we were there. How does that become the core of the learning experience and help inform credentialing and career pathwaying? So I think that's what we're pushing on, right? It's not just a wake up, right? But stop hand wringing, right? Stop worrying about the future of work, even though we know we should be concerned, and understand how do we leverage the tools and the knowledge that we do have to kind of better prepare, because we know companies are doing it, but for some reason, or at least the ones that are really trying to be ahead of the curve are doing it. Then how do institutions like higher ed institutions become much more agile in their thinking and move out of medieval thinking, right? That the way to learn is a traditional way to learn, kind of, town and gown approach, right? You just learn in a classroom. So that's kind of where my head is on it. So I'll stop there. I think Lisette, has more to add there.
Yeah.
So plumbing school hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away.
They're popular. Yeah.
What I will say is, this is where it is so important for us to know, whenever we hear the blue collar trades being brought up, and it's not for you, Anna, because we've had discussions about this, but they're for many people because it is a reaffirmation of a sorting mechanism in this country that is based on race and class. And so there is a piece of it which is, oh, this young person doesn't want to continue school. So instead of investigating why they're not continuing school or providing them with work-based opportunities while they're in school and realizing that could be a real incentive, what we'll say is this person should just be in this track and doing that. And so that has been kind of a history of that. I mean, I always look at, you know, the work that Michael Collins done at JFF and thinking about particularly where we see Black Americans and where they have been disproportionately represented in lower wage jobs. So I say that, right? So it's interesting when you start out as a plumber, you're not making the 80K everybody talks about, right? And it's also a person to person business where you're going into someone's home, right?
Mhm.
It's so this is so for me when I think, and I love plumbers, I need them and I pay them enough to come. But what it says for me is I'm always curious about the assumption of why they're saying we need to do more of this. The other thing is what we're seeing is that young people are using AI on their internships if they are in an internship. They're already using it. Like we already know that. Like this part, you know, I asked my son one of the places he was interning, I said, how much of your work could be done by AI? And he literally looked at me and said, oh, mom, about 90%. I said,
Mhm.
okay, well, you have to be able to, you know, then we had a discussion around ethics, what we had to talk about certain things. But what's happening, and I'd say in the nonprofit sector, which in New York employs 20% of the pop, think about that, right? There are folks who are using it in their work right now. And who are these positive deviants, and how do we allow them to be very visible to understand that how it is an aid and not a crutch, how it is something that is not a hyper segmenter that we talk about. I always say, for any study you give me that AI is going to take these jobs down, I'll give you a study that says AI is going to build all these other jobs up, right? Right. We know it's in
Mhm.
this space. But I'm always careful about the sorting mechanism and the default that we have around assumptions around what people can bring to bear because they're not willing to face um, an education system that systematically is still functioning the way it did 200 years ago, right? So this is the challenge that we're facing right now. And it's hard to kind of change some of these systems. We know that. So I just wanted to add that because I didn't want Noel to feel like he was the only provocateur here.
No, no, I think this is really important. From the point of view of stakeholders, who needs to be kind of at the table to think about the future? Because I think with this kind of new technologies and sorting out that's occurring, we need to bring diverse voices to the solution here. And, we talked about companies, we talked about academia, maybe schools. Do you see a potential for engaging other stakeholders who could be the next generation solution to some of these future pathways?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Noel?
jump in and I'm gonna then have Noel jump in at right after. Anna, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about reflecting, as you say, on the research side is pushing on the disruption around this notion of this idea of one pathway that gets you somewhere. This is the beauty. I remember in Berlin when we had the conference that you hosted, we talked about the ever changing, right? Like people right now are obsessed of how do I know what that young person's going to do in their career? I was like, do you know how many different things they're going to do? Right?
Yeah.
I was not asked at 15, what was I going to do the rest of my life? That was not part of that. And so I think we're almost over compensating in a way. I actually say, I always think about it is I always ask young people, what is maybe the first thing you think you want to try? And that
I love that.
completely changes the conversation. And I say that with career changers too later in life. Are they go, oh my God, I don't know what. So what do you just want to try? And when you lower the stakes on that, then you realize what I'm building is what is the key strength we know in corporate America, but we know in nonprofit and public sector is adaptability. We are allowing and we're creating lifelong learners that are adaptable when we present it as that. Sometimes when we talk in pathways, we present it as stringent, as strict, and as very linear. And that's exactly not the way I would argue my career has been, or probably any of our careers. And we're setting up this almost platonic ideal of what a career is going to be because we're talking about career now to young people. And the truth, it's much more, I think of it as a tree with many branches versus one road.
I love this, Lisette, and it actually answers, I think, Tanya Smith here in the chat was asking, as a transition counselor, she's seeing a lot of young people struggling to find what their career path should be. But I think, to your point, lowering the stakes and saying, let's try it. You know, you are going to have so many options, but, you know, I always tell my students this because they're like, oh, it's not really the job that I want. But you need work experience regardless of what the job is about. Bad boss, by the way, it's a great learning experience. You learn a lot by, you know, working with somebody who is not exactly your ideal boss. So lowering those stakes, I think, is how we need to approach it and give people options. I love it. Noel, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, you know, your question is a good one around sort of at the table, and that, you know, Lisette got to this, you know, to the point, you know, who needs to be at the table, young people, families, all the things that we know. I would say right now at the level of national in the US, I mean, this has always been, I mean, work-based learning, particularly apprenticeships, have been a bipartisan issue. We talk about that in our first book. It's like you can go across the aisle. No one's going to say this is not something we want, right? That, you know, we need a talented labor pool. You know, we need people developed for the jobs we have now and for potential jobs in the future. And so having policymakers, having folks who are at the table to help really drive it, I think are important. One of the things that I would say that, and I'm critical of this too, is that we have right now in the space of workforce, where there's this hyper focus on systems change. I'm not saying that systems are important to look at. How do we get at the state level, and how do we let it trickle down into the to regional and local levels? I actually think that's okay as a strategy, but I think we need to be funding programs that are actually successful. I think we need to be funding research that bridges the gap between not just the outputs around economics, who gets jobs, who gets the credential, but ultimately what are the support systems for folks to reduce barriers to those opportunities, right? And COVID was pretty acute with helping us understand that. We looked at everything from transportation to access to education to healthcare. All those things were really on steroids, but for some reason we retract and pull back from that to think about what does it mean to provide opportunity and then provide the resources and support for that. So I do think, you know, you can do that and kind of really push that on the level from a state level, even the federal level, but there has to be a real support for the programs that are doing the work on the ground, that are bringing the stakeholders together in that substantive way, including, you know, employer partners and so on in that affair. The other thing I'll say is, and this is another research project that we're engaged in, which is, you know, leadership matters, and not just leadership, you know, in institutions, but leadership in communities and so on. We're doing a next text is on cross-sector leadership, and that's been sort of our driving kind of philosophy that, you know, you have to be multi-sector in mindset and in practice in order to implement this work. I mean, it's the work you do, Anna, and thinking about companies and thinking about this whole future of work. There has to be many stakeholders at the table, but there also has to be a shared lexicon. There has to be a shared language so we can understand how we actually communicate with each other. It's the same kind of UN model, right? Who is the person who's translating? But if we have a shared language in some way, that allows us to build trust, it allows us to have shared interests, shared goals, right? Shared direction. Skills and competencies are required for that, right? Who has the skills and competencies to execute on this work? And we see that with intermediaries in schools. It's like, you know, how do you support a young person to be prepared for work, but who's helping to get them, engaged in the workspace, who's supporting the work environment to allow for them to be successful, right? Because you're now dealing with a generation that's a lot younger that needs a different type of support. So who's supporting and developing those leaders in the organizations to better support them? That takes a kind of shared interest, all the things we just mentioned. So that's the work we want to do, is say, what does that look like? What are those kinds of components that are needed to be successful? And just like our other books, we're looking at bringing together these sort of bifurcated worlds of, workforce development, education, right, youth development, right, community development, economic development. How do we bring it together to see them all interconnected? We want to do the same thing on the leadership side, to say you can borrow from other sectors and learn how they've done it. No one has a monopoly on leadership and entrepreneurship. Business school does not, right? Lisette, you say that all the time, right? Leadership is not a business school affair, right? Entrepreneurship is not a business school affair. Everyone has that in some capacity. So we want to bring that together. So I think these conversations, and thank you again for having us, begin to sort of say, like, how do we continue to bridge it? And then that allows for people to come to the table who have not been invited because they didn't fit into those silos. When you start to think across, right, versus narrowly, now you start to say, you know what, let's talk to the CBOs, community-based organizations that are dealing with migration and immigration issues. How are they supporting those families that are eventually going into the schools, who are eventually going to be part of our labor pool and labor talent pool in the near future, right? Or even present. That's what we're thinking about.
Yeah. And one thing, if I could add from kind of my perch, I do not think that the HR as a function in companies has been, engaged to the level that they need to be. Because if the recruiter on the other side, if he sees their goal as selecting the best and eliminating people rather than including people, and that's the mindset, it's a very different direction. And every time I talk to the community-based organizations, et cetera, who are trying to lift up very diverse and oftentimes populations that do not fit into the traditional, resume format, unless we educate and train, and that's what we're trying to do in our program as well with strategic workforce planning, et cetera, that even if the CEO makes the big statement and commitment, unless it's executed down to the level of what is the recruitment process in our, in our organization, it's not going to deliver the results at the level that we want them to deliver. Everyone has to be committed to this mission. And so I see that the opportunity to collaborate there with internally trained people who are both recruiting, promoting, identifying opportunities for internships, et cetera. So, and oftentimes what I also see in companies that even the CEO makes a big commitment to, influential organizations, government entities, et cetera. And then they create a silo within the company. They bring in somebody and say, this is my dedicated person who's going to be looking after. And that person is usually doing program design, like with people who are already in, they're putting them through the onboarding process, et cetera, whereas the recruiters are left out. And I think that it needs to be much broader, integrated into how organizations think of talent coming in, and have that focus on inclusion rather than exclusion. So I think this is, like, again, from my very selfish perspective, we had some incredible, participation here, lots of questions around, in support of what your comments you've made, and questions from the students about how to, actually find those opportunities, because, we know of the importance of them, but then when we go out there into the market, we don't see those enough. And I think that there's also something, and I would love your kind of final comments on that. What can we do as NYU, as an institution that is based in the largest city in the United States, et cetera. And if we have visionaries like yourselves amongst ourselves, what can we do to kind of lift all boats on this, both experimenting and doing pilots or different projects here in the city, as well as an educational institution. How can we change our ways to accelerate this process? Lisette and Noel, whoever wants to jump in first.
I'll let Lisa end it. Yeah. I would say from, first of all, I think, and I think, it's pretty prescient that you have us here because your work is very much in line with this, right? And thinking about how do you, in your experience, and great deal of experience working in this industry, looking at talent and developing talent and pipelining talent into work. This has really been your sweet spot. And I think working with other leaders in your work as chair of the department, getting folks to be conscious of how we're looking at this, talent pipeline and being more expansive and engaging it globally the way you have, I think is a testament to that work. And I think within the context of SPS and in particular it's always been sort of agile to market needs and how do you begin to, expand, the development of leaders around this and people who work and in roles, a variety of roles. I do think that we're at a point right now, and I speak just for NYU on this, I could speak as a faculty member and as an alum, is that we have this incredible global footprint. And I think we could do more, even in New York, to be engaged and ingrained in kind of what is happening in this space. And I say that meaning that, how does a university that has such a footprint, how can we be really involved in the research that's taking place that is of the city, and about the city? How do we think about, the training and development of leaders who are going into the institutions, the biggest market, right? That we could think of in this country when it comes to finance and other areas, real estate, but other industries, nonprofit, as Lisette mentioned, right? We have a robust nonprofit and, foundation community like no other regional economy has. And I think those are areas I think we can do better. And globally, with these footprints, the question is, what's that engagement look like, right? Because that means that it's going to have to be, and this is not just sophistry, right? New age sophistry around this, but how do you become, porous and open that allows for, those who are in the practice space to be engaged and mutually working on issues, whether it be research or practice, right, with the institutions itself, right, and not just for those who are enrolled or who are hired, as faculty and so on. So I know there's a number of engagements around it. Tulsa is doing a lot of this and so on, which is exciting. So I do think we have these incredible examples of what we can do, but I think we can do more to reach into it. So that's kind of where my head is. And I've been to a number of the sites and, and seen the work and spent time in our institutions there. Even in Abu Dhabi, when I was there, there's talk about how can we do more within the context of the UAE around leadership and other things. So that's kind of where my head is. And I think we're pushing on it in these conversations. We're pushing on it in the research and in our teaching and the convening of leaders, right? Because we do that as well, under the Center for Youth in the Future of Work, to really get folks to understand that we can actually work across these silos and work collectively. And that is, I think, the community building part. So NYU, as a major convener, has the power of convening, right?
I love that.
So that's just kind of my assessment of it, Lisa.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Noel. Noel, you'll be finishing up. So words of wisdom from you.
All right. So,
Lisette, sorry.
No problem. No
Sorry.
problem.
Noel, I just, yeah.
No, I was super, thank you, Noel, because I think that was exactly a lot of the points I would hit. The only ones that I would add to that is really it's a little bit around we're in a city and young people are not feeling or trusting institutions in the way they had in the past. And there has to be an honest examination of that and remedies to that. I do believe that. And that's not just NYU, that's anywhere. And I say that because I think that's a really important piece. I think right now we're at a moment where, because we have such strong global connections, that we can actually constantly remind young people and all students that what they're doing is investing in their mobility and showing them why that matters. I don't think we should be upset at that. That will mean, and this is where the provocateur piece comes in, that will mean that there has to be a greater engagement and recognition of clinical faculty and others who bring in the translation that's important for them to be able to bridge what I call the town and gown. And so I feel that there's no greater city. There's no question. I don't want to live anywhere but here. I love to travel, but I'd love to live here. And I believe that NYU could be the place to do that, because that is literally the challenge that all higher ed's dealing with right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much. I think it means that we will have to have you back. This has been an incredibly engaging conversation. Thank you. So this is the list of the upcoming event. Please join us again. And Noel and Lisette, thank you so much. I'm such a big fan of yours, and I've learned a lot, even though I follow you every day. You know, I've learned a lot from this conversation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon, and the recording is going to be shared with all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.